Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Thursday everybody. Across China in several major cities, renewed spontaneous protests have emerged. The protesters are not migrant workers calling for labor rights or young people agitating for political change, but rather tens of thousands of elderly Chinese demonstrating against health insurance reforms. Since 2021, China has been pushing through changes that would cut individual reimbursements for medical care in exchange for an expansion of the range of outpatient medical services on offer. One location of the current set of protests is in Wuhan, where approximately 1,000 seniors gathered outside of Wuhan's Zhongshan Park, less than a mile from the city's government offices. Under the health insurance reforms, the authorities say that all adults and retirees included will have access to subsidized visits to the doctor, and that this will ease healthcare burdens for all households. The protesters are not buying it though. UK-based Financial Times sent a journalist to be on the ground in Wuhan, where protesters said that the new outpatient insurance comes with a high deductible and low coverage, meaning that it will cost them more to see a doctor. One elderly demonstrator expressed to the outlet, quote, "This is robbery. The government wants to use my money to subsidize others without my permission." End quote. US-based Wall Street Journal reports that in recent months, authorities in various Chinese provinces and regions have started rolling out changes that resulted in sharp cuts to the amount of money that citizens, especially the elderly, can receive for medical care, prompting public anger. Local governments have been empowered to determine the timetables and scale of the cuts, it adds. Wuhan, the provincial capital of Hubei, is one case example. According to Chinese financial media outlet Caixin, Wuhan's reforms now provide for 2.5% of the city's average basic pension in 2021 to go into the health insurance personal accounts of local retired workers. The rate was around 5% previously. The outlet adds that disputes across the country have emerged after China set in motion the long-discussed restructuring of its medical insurance system all the way back in 2020. In December last year, for example, elderly residents in the southern metropolis of Guangzhou engaged in demonstrations similar to what we are currently seeing in Wuhan and other major cities. Commentators agree that policymakers, however, are between a rock and a hard place. Quote, "The cuts are part of a restructuring of the medical insurance system that predates the fiscal stresses caused by COVID and the response. But even if these cuts have been in the works for a while, rolling them out just after the COVID exit wave and the anger that caused for many, especially in this age cohort, seems like a bad idea. But even if local governments now want to delay or roll back the cuts, do they have the fiscal resources to do so? And how does forcing retirees to pay more for healthcare encourage people to spend and consume instead of save more for retirement and the inevitable healthcare expenses?" End quote. Okay, next up, China's first wave of Omicron cases, which washed across the country in the weeks after abandoning zero COVID, early December through January, has largely passed now. China can move into the year of the rabbit with painful memories and lingering economic fallout, but with hope that things can now move back to some sort of pre-pandemic normalcy. Some questions may remain, however, and one question which will likely never be answered fully is just how many people died during the opening wave of infections. Of course, the official death rate, 83,000 people as of February 9th, likely dramatically undercounts the real number. Among other criticism, the number only includes infected people who died in hospitals, excluding anyone who died at home. Some domestic commentators have pointed out that Chinese health officials put the official COVID death rate by December 2022 at 0.08%. Assuming that 80% of people were infected in China during the first wave, which is also the official position, then a reasonable starting point would be over 890,000 deaths. International analysts place the number even higher. The US-based New York Times, speaking to 4 different experts, estimate 1 to 1.5 million deaths during the 2-month wave period. quote, 4 separate academic teams have converged on broadly similar estimates. China's COVID wave may have killed between 1 million and 1.5 million people. All of the researchers consulted by the New York Times cautioned that without reliable data from China, the estimates should be understood as informed guesses with significant uncertainty. End quote. Of course, China, like elsewhere, is still seeing cases, but they are modest in number and are not crippling hospital infrastructure like we saw during the first wave surge. Experts are still expressing frustration, however, at the lack of data transparency. For example, a month after the peak, reported deaths at China's hospitals have dropped to about 100 a day. Quote, "It's not the typical pattern that you would expect in a country like China. China's population is several times of the US level, so you would expect the actual death toll would be higher, much higher." End quote. While we're on this theme, one more development. The World Health Organization has abandoned the second phase of its scientific investigation into the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. Publication Nature reports that the decision to shelve the investigation was due to, quote, "ongoing challenges over attempts to conduct crucial studies in China." End quote. We recall that since the very beginning of the pandemic back in early 2020, Beijing maintained that no conclusions should be made about the origins of the pandemic until the WHO conducted a full scientific investigation. To wipe salt in the wound, after the news of the scrapped WHO investigation, PRC Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin called for an inquiry into whether COVID-19 started in the United States. Quote, "China has shared more data and research findings on SARS-CoV-2 origin study than any other country. This fully demonstrates China's open, transparent, and responsible attitude and its support for the work of the WHO. Many have raised questions and concerns about US biomilitary bases at Fort Detrick and around the world. The WHO and SAGO should take a close look at these clues, effectively cooperate with these relevant countries, and share research findings with all parties in a timely way." End quote. Next up, updates for the Chinese economy and population decline. Hey guys, if you enjoyed today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit the like button. As many of you guys know, it is just me that is making these. There's no corporation or backers behind me. And as such, I primarily rely on this community, those who watch these episodes, in order to keep the channel sustainable. So for anyone who can go that extra mile and help in this regard, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. But even just liking, sharing, and watching is a massive help. So as always, however you do support the channel, my deepest appreciation for all the support. Okay, let's briefly move through 2 important economic updates. The first is, as we have anticipated, Chinese banks reported slower net profit growth in 2022, citing declining net interest margins, among other factors. According to a report released on Wednesday yesterday by the China Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission, the aggregate net profit of China's commercial banks grew 5.4% in 2022, compared with 12.6% in 2021. While 2022 was a terrible year for the economy, we should note that 2021 was a high base year, coming after the damage done in 2020. Commercial banks' net interest margins dropped to 1.91% in Q4 of last year, from 1.97% in Q1. This was driven by marching orders from Beijing to lower corporate financing costs to support the economy. The 6.8% year-on-year increase in new yuan-denominated loans in 2022 was driven by an increase in corporate borrowing, according to the People's Bank of China. This squeezing of bank profits, in part, explains why state media has been calling on households to not pay their mortgages back early. The next economic update is Chinese financial media outlet Yicai reports that the medium disposable income level of residents in 6 Chinese cities now exceed 70,000 RMB as of last year. The 6 cities are Guangzhou, Suzhou, Hangzhou, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and the capital, Beijing. This 70,000 RMB median disposable income level is seen as a threshold for a city with wealthy residents. This thus reminds us that while the Chinese economy as a whole is large and per capita GDP is moderate, per capita income levels remain modest, and income disparities remain entrenched. 70,000 yuan, the threshold for well-off individuals, is only about $10,000 a year. Guangzhou, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Beijing are all so-called Tier 1 cities. The newest entries to the 70,000 club are Hangzhou and Suzhou, driven by new high-value jobs from dynamic private sector industries. Suzhou, a medium-sized Jiangsu city an hour from Shanghai, has seen a concentration of new technology firms and increased spending on research and development in recent years. Hangzhou, also about an hour from Shanghai by high-speed rail, is both the provincial capital of wealthy Zhejiang province as well as the home to many internet businesses, including, critically, the headquarters of internet giant Alibaba Group Holding. And finally, for today's video, a new survey, which is now trending on the Chinese internet, shows that the percentage of childless women in China has surged to nearly 10% in 2020, up from 6.1% in 2015. The results, which should not be particularly surprising to anyone who has been following PRC demographic trends in recent years, has nevertheless sparked debate among netizens over the reasons for and implications of the survey results. The hashtag "The lifetime childless rate in China has risen to about 10% has been seen 500 million times on Weibo, attracting over 30,000 comments. The most common observation was that the cost of raising children in modern China is simply too high. For example, one comment with several thousand likes expressed, quote, "If all worries such as medical care and housing were taken care of, people would naturally be willing to have children." End quote. Others expressed that views of family formation are changing. The survey was published by the China Population and Development Forum over the weekend. In addition to the previously mentioned childless rate, it also showed that the average number of children per woman has declined from 1.63 in 2019 to 1.19 in 2022. According to the survey, women born in the 1990s and 2000s only intend to have just 1.5 children on average. The average household has also dropped to 2.62 people in 2020, from 3 people in 2010. We remember that China's population officially fell for the first time in over half a century in 2022. Demographic decline represents one of the biggest long-term challenges to Chinese economic growth and political power projection. And on this theme, one last thing. China's urbanization rate is often pointed to as an engine driving sustained moderate levels of economic performance and justifying high investment levels in infrastructure and housing. However, according to the recently published China Statistical Yearbook 2022, China Business News reports that at the end of 2022, China's permanent urban population reached 920.71 million, an increase of only 6.46 million year-on-year, with the increase rate falling to its slowest pace in 42 years. This is quite a slowdown from the period 2010 through 2020, when more than 20 million fresh urban residents were added almost every year to Chinese cities. Zero COVID disruptions have been cited as the lead cause for the slowdown last year, with the rate expected to moderately rebound this year. But experts warn that the urbanization trend is clear: sustained decline. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a wonderful day wherever you are, and I will see you all tomorrow.